Welcome to the Storm Stackup, where we give you an inside look at all things Dixie State athletics. I'm your host, Carrick Segmiller.
And I'm Ryan Forsey. Today we'll chat with men's golf head coach Brad Sutterfield, as well as catch up with women's soccer senior midfielder Kaisa Rogers in our player profile feature. But first, we start with the Red Storm recap to review the last week in Dixie State athletics.
Today we start off with volleyball. After dropping matches on the road at Cal Baptist and Point Loma, Dixie State volleyball opened its home schedule Wednesday night against Notre Dame Dana Muir. It was all Red Storm early on in the match as the home side claimed victories in the first two sets, winning 25-17 and 25-14. But NDNU wouldn't go down easy. The Argonauts rallied to take sets 3 and 4 and held a lead in the decisive fifth set before the Storm took over and finished off the win with a 15-9 victory in the final stanza. Taylor Duryea led the way with a team-high 21 kills, and Delane Daniel added yet another double-double with 19 kills and 18 digs. That game really was an up-and-down game the other night at the Student Activity Center, and you've coached high school sports before. In fact, you do so currently here in the area. As a coach, you look at a game like that, a roller coaster game, up and down, you're winning, you're losing, and all of a sudden you find yourself having to come back and win at the very last second. How big is that for a team to be able to say, we've got that momentum now going forward?
Well, it's huge, and talking with Coach Robin Felder, she really touched on that during the match, how big of a confidence confidence builder for her team. This is a pretty young team. I mean, you're only looking at a few seniors on this team. And it was a really good opportunity not only for the team to come together, but also for the coach. I mean, you start off that first set down a few points, and she calls that timeout immediately. And that's the things that coaches have to recognize, because immediately after that timeout, the Red Storm go on a 10-1 scoring, which really set the tone. Even though it was kind of up and down, they still had the opportunity to kind of bounce back from that deficit and really get the momentum going. And really, in volleyball, that's the key. Of any sport, volleyball is really a game of momentum.
I had a chance to catch up with head coach Robin Felder as well after the game the other night, and she just was almost like a little bit exasperated and said, I am so glad that we were able to pick up this win. And I said, Coach, at this point, a win is a win. You'll take it at this point. Now the Storm 4-7 overall, 1-2 in Pac-West play. That was a first conference victory. A big win really for the volleyball team the other night, and like we mentioned, the momentum going forward.
Yeah, and really an opportunity to see a freshman kind of have her moment in Taylor Duryea, and that's what, you know, a young team has to have these opportunities to do. And Coach Felden is really doing a good job of incorporating her senior leaders to bring those underclassmen up with Alex Anderson and Mackenzie Bird Murphy. You know, those are the leaders. They're the ones that are going to have to set the tone. So it was a really good opportunity and a good win.
Moving on now to men's soccer. After a 3-2 loss to the USL side Real Monarchs last week, Coach Josh Pittman and his team took the field at Hanson Stadium last night, the team's first Pac-West Conference game of the season. The Storm jumped out to an early lead against Azusa Pacific behind the foot of Frankie Malik, who took a pass from Santiago Alejandro in the 17th minute and found the back of the net from the right side. However, the Cougars would not be kept off the scoreboard, responded just 5 minutes before halftime. Both teams with chances in the second half, but couldn't break through, and the game ended in a 1-1 double overtime draw. Talked to Coach Pittman after the game, and he said it probably was a fitting result to the game. We both played well. We both had things that we didn't, meaning both teams, both had things that we didn't do as well during the game, but we were both able to fix those things, and probably a fitting result as both teams had chances in regulation, in overtime, and it ends in a 1-1 double overtime draw.
Yeah, well, and a lot of similarities with soccer and women's volleyball. Both young teams, only 5 seniors compared to 13 juniors coming up with the men's soccer. So Coach Pittman has some work cut out. Now, the encouraging thing is that this team is starting well. They're scoring early and they're scoring often. It's finishing that really has become the problem. And that's not necessarily a problem, but it's a part of growth. And again, you have to rely on your leadership. Now, Frankie Malik has had an outstanding start to the year. He's leading the team in goals scored and shots on goal. And that's the type of momentum that you want to have, especially from only a sophomore. But again, you know, it's a little disappointing. This was a winnable game. This was against a team that hadn't posted a victory yet. And it's a little disappointing, but again, at the same time, you want to build on the positive.
Absolutely. And of course, talking to Coach Pittman last night after the game, I said, Coach, well, you didn't get the win, but at least you didn't drop the game. And he kind of had that look on his face like, yeah, we could have. They may have lost the game were it not for the goalkeeper, Bradley Trell, a huge save. Had 2 crucial saves, once in the 66th minute, another one later in the 71st minute that kept the Red Storm and Azusa Pacific tied in that game at 1-1. So big save from Bradley Trella. The Red Storm improved to 2-1-1 overall, and in conference play 0-0-1 with the draw. Moving on to women's soccer now. The women's soccer team also had its first Pac West game at home Thursday night, but number 18 Azusa Pacific rained on the Red Storm parade, breaking a 1-1 tie in the second half with 3 goals to secure the 4-1 victory at Hanson Stadium. Jasmine Arroyo scored the lone goal for Dixie State in the 49th minute in that game, and of course that goal that Arroyo scored was the first goal that Azusa Pacific had conceded all season, and you're thinking, hey, maybe we'll get out of here with at least a draw. Cougars had other ideas with 3 goals in the second half.
Yeah, this was a tough matchup for the Red Storm. I mean, really, you've got a top-ranked team coming in. They're undefeated. They haven't allowed a goal, as you mentioned, in 4 consecutive matches. And really, Jasmine really had a great shot on it off a throw-in, I believe, and really just put it in the back of the net. And it really set the tone, especially coming after last week's events against the RSL semi-pro team in the women's game. But it just kind of went downhill from that. And speaking with Coach Bingham, she kind of felt the same way, that they just weren't mentally prepared. They were a little scared. They weren't aggressive enough defending the set pieces of APU, and it really just kind of snowballed from there and contributed to the loss.
Later in the show, we'll have a player profile with senior midfielder Kaisa Rogers of the women's soccer team. Moving on now to women's golf. The women's golf team down in New Mexico, the Western New Mexico tournament, they tied for 8 out of 20 teams. Individually, Colbert Collinsworth went 1 over for the tournament, tied for 15th with rounds of 70 and 75. Also up in the mix for Dixie State, Shelby Madden, 2 over for the tournament, tied for 18th with rounds of 74 and 72. Football fell on the road to number 25, then number 25, now number 17, Humboldt State. 66-7 on the road to the Lumberjacks. Blake Barney scored the only touchdown for the Storm in the first quarter on a 33-yard touchdown run. Really not a lot you can take from a loss like that. Even talking to some of the coaches afterwards saying, I don't know if I even really want to look at the stats. You know, we'll go back and we'll look at the film and see what we could have done better, but really it's next game up, next game forward in a game like that.
No, that's exactly right. You really just want to bounce back from this and kind of move forward. If anything we know about Dixie State, there's a lot of growth happening here. You've got a young quarterback, you've got 2 new coordinators in Blank Mockers and a defensive coordinator, Shay McClure, and this team has to find its identity. The fact that they got blown out their first game, came back and just demolished their next game, and then blown out again is kind of to be expected. It's going to be a roller coaster ride of a season until this team figures out who they are and they get some cohesiveness and some experience together, build that chemistry, learn the playbooks, learn how to act and react, and then they're going to build on victories.
Of course, football taking on Azusa Pacific in the homecoming game on Saturday. We'll break that game down, later in the show today. First, we've got to take a break. When we come back, we'll sit down and chat with men's head golf coach Brad Sutterfield. More Red Storm Stackup after this.
The Community Education Channel, serving Washington County for 20 years, covering DSU athletics, local high school events, city councils, the Economic Summit, Chamber of Commerce meetings, community events like Washington City Veterans Day celebration, and much more. Visit cectvutah.com for broadcast schedule and more information.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
There is a place where the sun doesn't hide in the winter, where the greens stay green and the crimson canyons still glow. There is a place where dimples determine destiny, and a tiny wooden tee holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where we drive for show, putt for dough, and settle the score with another round. There is a place.
And welcome back to the Storm Stackup inside the studio of CEC TV on the campus of Dixie State University. We're looking at Dixie State athletics as always, and we're in this segment happy to have men's golf coach Brad Sutterfield with us. Coach, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
We appreciate you stopping by and being on the show with us today. St. George is a golf mecca. Always has been, always will be. I like to start off with an easy question as we get these interviews going. What's your favorite course to play here in St. George?
Well, that's a tough one to answer because we have such good access to all these courses that they love us. They love us having at their courses, so we play them all. But, you know, we go to the ledges a lot, Sunbrook, Sand Hollow. I love them all.
You're beginning your 4th year here as the head coach at Dixie State University in the men's golf program. I want to rewind just a little bit. Let's go back to the summer 2012. Reed MacArthur, still the coach here at Dixie State, just getting ready to retire. The job comes open. Where were you at the time? What were you doing? What caught your eye about the Dixie State job?
Well, I had finished playing professionally in 2007 and really just gave it up cold turkey. And I was working for a sales for a technology company in town, and Jason Booth called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in this?" And I said, "Well, I'd sure like to take a look." And then I, looked at it more and decided, I love the game of golf. I've been around it my whole life. I wanted to feel like I could give back a little bit more. I think I have a lot to offer the college athlete from my experience playing college and professionally. And so, yeah, I took it, and next thing you know, we're 4 years into it.
How difficult was it to give up playing professionally cold turkey like that?
I thought it was going to be hard, but as soon as I did, it was easy. As soon as I gave up, I don't like to use the word gave up, but as soon as I decided to do something else, it was almost a relief. I had a lot of injuries and wasn't doing too well, and it was just time.
Let's talk about some of the interesting dynamics of being a golf coach. Obviously, you look at it, it's got to be a little bit different than being a football or a soccer or a basketball coach. Take us through a typical day of practice at Dixie State men's golf.
Well, a lot of times we just play 18 holes and qualify for our next trip, especially in the spring. We've got so many tournaments, every other week, that I got to get the guys on the course to see who's playing the best and have them qualify and shoot a score, and the low scores go. As far as the typical practice goes, I give them drills to do. We go up to the course. They have certain putting drills, tripping drills, driving drills. I don't like them to spend a lot of time just pounding balls on the driving range. I did that when I was playing. It didn't really work too well. I have them really work hard on their short game, their distance control, how far they're hitting the clubs. Most of the guys are pretty good at it. They're not real good at it when they come in, knowing how far they hit the ball. It's such a distance-controlled game that they really need to know how far the ball's going.
One thing I've always wondered about, and you see the coaches at tournaments and in these collegiate tournaments, how much are you able to interact with your players during a tournament? Is it something that you're completely on the sidelines just having to watch, or are you able to have some interactions with your players, give some tips and help along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in there as much as I can. Obviously, with 5 guys playing, I can't be all in one place all the time. And there's some guys that don't, Kenny Yu, our All-American, he doesn't like to have a whole lot of input. He kind of does it himself. So when I'm around him, I just, I might put in a little bit of my thoughts on a few things, but more to encourage him. And then other guys really want a lot of help. So when I am there, I'm help reading their putts, checking the wind, checking their yardage, things like that. So I don't like to just sit in the cart and watch. I like to be involved and see what the guys are doing.
Through 3 seasons, you've got the team on an upward trend. Year 1, you finished 3rd in the Pac West. Year 2, you finish in 2nd. You win Pac West Coach of the Year. And then just last year, you finish and you win a Pac West championship in the tournament at the end of the season. What's been the key to that upward trend that you've seen with Dixie State men's golf?
Well, number one is recruiting. I think I'm a good recruiter. With the record I have from my history, I think it helps guys to want to come here. Being where we are with the access we have to the golf courses, the weather, it's a very attractive place for kids to come. And so, yeah, I think it's recruiting. You got to get the guys that can play. If they can come in and already have a good handle on how to play, then I just work with them on their course management, their attitudes, the way they play the game, just a little bit of the nuances of the game that they quite haven't learned yet. And then that can save a stroke here or there. But number one is recruiting.
Of course, you're 2 weeks into the 2015-2016 season. You're after a fantastic start. You're 3rd place up at the St. Martin's tournament. You had 2 players in the top 10. Then just this last week, Followed up with the team win at Western Washington. You have 2 players in the top 3, including the individual winner and Andrew Chu. How much fun are these guys having right now?
Yeah, they're having a blast, you know, and it kind of goes back to the recruiting. You know, we recruited Andrew Chu out of Vegas. He was getting a lot of Division I offers and decides to come to Dixie and wins his 2nd college tournament as a freshman. Almost unheard of. It happens, but not very often. So they're having a lot of fun. They're good guys. They get along well. They love to play. They love to practice. I like guys to come in and like to practice, to not feel like they have to practice.
Let's take a look ahead at this next week. Head down to Las Cruces, New Mexico for the Western New Mexico Regional Preview on Monday and Tuesday. What challenges does that tournament offer? Talk about the course that you'll be playing on a little bit and what you expect down in New Mexico.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. The tournaments we played in last week, strong fields, pretty top heavy in fields. Probably the top 5 teams were strong. The lowers were not as strong as we are. But the teams that we're going to play in regionals, the regional preview, all are really planning on being back there for regionals. Chico State's, I think, the number 2 team in the country. Monterey Bay's probably number 6. You've got Sonoma State, Dominican. So I think if we go there and have a top 5 finish, we should be happy with it. So we can win, absolutely, but this early in the year, it's more about just getting a handle on the course we're going to come back to, get the guys comfortable with it, learn how to play that course, so when we get back to regionals, we have a good shot to make it to nationals.
Of course, after that, just one more tournament before you take the long break until February. Last question I have for you, Coach, and then that goes back to one of those interesting dynamics of being a golf coach. It's one of those sports that's split into 2 different seasons of the year. I mean, what is it like coaching a team like that, and what challenges does it add? And you gain some momentum in the fall, and then all of a sudden you got to take a break, and you're not really at it as a team again until February. There's
a lot of challenges. One is time for me to spend on basically 2 seasons. Gets pretty busy, but I think we have really motivated guys here. So during the off season, they're working, they're getting better. We can't really touch them, so to speak, on practice and whatnot. The fall season's kind of the funny season, kind of the silly season in the sense where the tournaments matter, but they're not like the spring where it's really into the championship season. But over the winter, I expect the guys to work hard to come back in the spring ready to go, and typically they are.
Well, Coach, we appreciate you stopping by the studio today and chatting with us. We've got to run to break, but again, men's golf will be in Las Cruces, New Mexico for the Western New Mexico Regional Preview on Monday and Tuesday. We'll have all the updates for you on DixieAthletics.com. We've got to take the break. When we come back, we'll take a look at homecoming week and what's in store this weekend, as well as break down Saturday's football game against Azusa Pacific. More Red Storm Stackup after this.
There is a place where rocks bleed and nature blushes on a battlefield green with envy, where dimples determine destiny and a tiny wooden tee holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where friends are opponents and opponents are friends, where the prize is elusive, the conquest is captivating, and the score isn't settled till the drinks are down. There is a place.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
The Community Education Channel, serving Washington County for 20 years, covering DSU athletics, local high school events, city councils, the Economic Summit, Chamber of Commerce meetings, community events like Washington City Veterans Day celebration, and much more. Visit CECTVUtah.com for broadcast schedule and more information.
There is a place where the sun doesn't hide in the winter, where the greens stay green and the crimson canyons still glow. There is a place where dimples determine destiny, and a tiny wooden tee holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where we drive for show, putt for dough, and settle the score with another round. There is a place.
And welcome back to the Storm Stackup inside the CEC TV studio. Carrick Segmiller, Ryan Forsey. In this segment, we move along. We discuss homecoming week. A lot of things going on here at homecoming week. Let's talk about the things that are coming up this weekend with the rest of homecoming. First, of course, it starts it all off on Saturday. You've got the parade at 10 a.m. A lot of these things happen concurrently, so you're going to really have to be in a lot of different places at once if you want to get to all of them. But you've got the parade on Saturday at 10 a.m. Men's and women's soccer taking on Point Loma, the women's game at 10 a.m., the men's match at 12:30 p.m., and then volleyball, again, happening concurrently with all of those things. Volleyball at home against Holy Names, second conference game of the season at noon in the Student Activity Center. Wrapping it all up with the football game against Azusa Pacific at 6 p.m. that night. As always, we've got a lot going on around campus in athletics for homecoming week, but something we wanted to discuss a little bit more and in depth here is Saturday's football game. Of course, the Red Storm host an Azusa Pacific team that was ranked number 17 to start the season. Cougars, after a loss to Humboldt State, aren't currently ranked, but will provide another tough test for the Storm. And we mentioned it earlier, the thing about this football team is you never know through 3 games which team you're going to get. Are you going to get the team that was blown out by Colorado Mesa, the team that blew out Central Washington, or the team that was, again, blown out by Humboldt State?
Well, one thing we do know about this Dixie State team is that they do respond to adversity. After the opening game in the season, very disappointing, very upsetting. The team bounced back and had what Coach Brumfield called the best week of practice he's seen in years here at Dixie State. And they responded with the victory. Now, you can say what you want to say about Humboldt. They're a team on the rise. Their record reflects that. They've had a good win, a big win, against APU in California. But that's a tough road trip. Dixie State has predominantly struggled with that road trip, and I'm sure the coaching staff, players, family, everybody is kind of saying, we're glad to have this road trip over with after this season.
I can tell you, as a member of the athletic department, everybody in the athletic department is happy to have that road trip over with. I was on the bus as well, all 18 hours both ways on that trip. An interesting thing about this football team is the fact that you've got a really dynamic running back in DeJon Coleman. Mm-hmm. We saw what he could do, 3 touchdowns against Central Washington. He ran for over 100 yards, 124 yards, I believe it was, the net rushing for him. Blake Barney can also run it a little bit. He's got 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, but you've also got some good receivers in Nate Stevens, Brad Duran. We haven't seen a whole lot in the freshman Demario Hammonds coming in quite yet, but it's a team that's been predominantly run, but they tried to throw it a little bit last week at Humboldt, and I think they're going to have to do that again this week against Azusa Pacific. The coaches told me last week, we've got to get the pass game going so we can open up the running game a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. From an offensive standpoint, this is a pivotal game really for the season. Dixie State is leading the GNAC conference in its rushing game. As you mentioned, Blake Barney and DeJon. Now, last week, Humboldt stacked the box and shut the run game down, and it forced Blake to throw. And that was pretty much what we can expect from APU. They're gonna make Blake, and they're gonna say, hey, we dare you to make these connections. So not only is Blake gonna have to step up, but the receiving core, as you mentioned, Carrick, is also gonna have to step up as well. Now, if there's anybody in this conference that gets creative with the passing game, it's Blaine Monkers. Phenomenal track record throughout his whole coaching career as being creative, being an innovator with the passing game. And this is a team and an opportunity for these young men, for this offense, to really show what some of this can do and what Coach Monkers has in store. So it's going to be an interesting sight to see how Dixie State really responds, especially with that aerial attack.
Of course, Dixie State, Azusa Pacific squaring off on Saturday, 6 p.m. at Hanson Stadium. One last note on that game before we continue on here in the Storm Stackup. Azusa Pacific coming into this game ranked 5th out of 7 teams in the GNAC in rushing defense. Red Storm just happened to be a predominantly rushing team so far this season, but you can expect to see, like you mentioned, the passing game open up with some quick hitters, some quick outs, and then maybe letting Blake Barney open a little bit up down the field and trying to hit one of his receivers, really for what would be the first time this season down the field. So again, football on Saturday taking on Azusa Pacific, the homecoming game, 6 o'clock at Hanson Stadium. With that, we'll step away. We'll take another break. When we come back, We've got a player profile with senior midfielder Kaisa Rogers of the women's soccer team, as well as we take a look ahead at what is to come in Red Storm athletics. Back after this on the Storm Stackup.
There is a place where the sun doesn't hide in the winter, where the greens stay green and the crimson canyons still glow. There is a place where dimples determine destiny, and a tiny wooden tee holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where we drive for show, putt for dough, and settle the score with another round. There is a place.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
The Community Education Channel, serving Washington County for 20 years, covering DSU athletics, local high school events, city councils, the Economic Summit, Chamber of Commerce meetings, community events like Washington City Veterans Day celebration, and much more. Visit cectvutah.com for broadcast schedule and more information.
And welcome back inside the CEC TV studio one final time on this episode of the Storm Stackup. We come back from break with a player profile with women's soccer senior midfielder Kaisa Rogers, put together by Storm Stackup correspondents Shelby Young and Nicole Johnson.
From the CEC Sports Office, you're watching Player Profiles. This week, Johnson and Young are featuring Dixie State soccer player Kaisa Rogers, number 18.
Soccer, it keeps me motivated and keeps me sane. It gives me something to do. It's an outlet for my stress. I'm Kaisa Rogers. I'm from Springville, Utah, and I started to play soccer when I was 4 years old. What inspires me to play the sport is my love for the game. I have one older brother. Watching him play soccer made me want to play soccer, and my dad was always one of my coaches growing up, so he kept me involved. As a team, I expect us to win a lot of games. We've got a lot of great girls, a lot of young incoming players that have stepped up their game, and so it's really competitive every practice. Individually, I just want to be a big contributor to the team and just make us better. Having good organization, good communication, working together as a team, and keeping good team chemistry throughout the season. Before every game, I visualize myself doing well, scoring goals, making good passes, the anticipation of watching it go past the keeper into the net. Definitely take AP classes during high school, maybe get a job so you know how to work, and definitely show up prepared for your first season. Be in good shape, just be really prepared physically. Not only do you have to focus on soccer, but on school, and if you have a job, having time for your job, and also having time for friends and for your relationships. So I've learned how to manage my time.
Again, that's women's soccer midfielder Kaisa Rogers. Good work from Storm Stackup correspondents Shelby Young and Nicole Johnson. We look forward to having those player profiles throughout the year on the Storm Stackup. Before we let you go and before we wrap up this episode of the Storm Stackup, we need to take a look ahead. We've talked about some of the things coming up later this weekend, so we'll move right to some of the other sports. Women's golf on the road at Metro State Denver on the 28th and 29th, that tournament there in Denver. Men's golf on the road at the Western New Mexico tournament, the tournament the women's team was just at previously. That tournament played on the 28th and 29th of this month. And then women's tennis getting in their first tournament of the season at the Colorado Mesa tournament on October 1st through the 3rd. And that's our look ahead here on the Storm Stackup of the next week in Dixie State Athletics. It's been a great show, Ryan. Appreciate you coming along. Excited to have you along on the Storm Stackup this season. What a show. Storm Stackup Episode 2 in the books here on CEC TV. We'll catch you next time right here on the Storm Stackup.